Welcome to OpenHive.JS, the podcast for all things JavaScript. I'm your host, James Snell, and
I'm Matteo Collina.
I think from a project perspective, right, you have a lot of different groups that need to feed into this. This is a public health application. It's not just a technical solution that's needed. There's a lot of things that have to wrap around that as well. If you think about all the privacy concerns of an application like this, the process you have to go through in order to get the Data Protection Commissioner approval. So key to success really was very effective collaboration across all the different groups that are involved.
For this special all NearForm episode, we've sat down with our colleagues Colm Harte, Kevin Devine, and Shaun Baker, who have spent the past number of months designing, building, and deploying Ireland's COVID-19 tracker app, which to date has been the most successful government contact tracing app to have been released. We get to ask all about the specific technology used and why they chose it, the challenges presented by a project with this much riding on it, and much more.
API gateway, we're using Fargate, we're using Lambda functions that we've mentioned, we're using the typical service like CloudWatch, CloudTrail, we're using the web application firewall, AWS Shield, we're using S3, we're using SQS and SNS. I'm sure there's a few others in there, or we are using RDS as well, sorry for the backend database.
It's pretty much, all of the above. We're getting into it, and you're coming with us. This is OpenHive.JS from NearForm.
Hi folks, I'm Matteo speaking. I know all of you very well, but our listeners probably don't know that very well. So maybe you can go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi Matteo, so I'm Colm Harte. I'm based in Ireland. I've been with NearForm now for over 5 years, and I was leading the technical team that was delivering the contact tracing solution for Ireland.
Hi Matteo, I'm Kevin Devine, a designer based in Ireland also. I've been working with NearForm for over 3 years, and I would have led the design in the initial phase of the Covet tracker project.
Hi, yeah, and I'm Shaun. I've been with NearForm a couple of years and worked on the Covet tracker app as a developer on the team.
So we have our all-star NearForm here at our podcast. Wow.
Yeah, and the first time we've had more than one guest, so welcome all. This is going to be a bit of a different one. So why don't we start off with just a very simple question? What is the COVID tracker app?
Sure. So the COVID tracker app is a digital contact tracing solution which uses Bluetooth technology to detect when people come within close proximity to each other, and if they come in close proximity and meet the correct criteria around the duration they've been in proximity, it allows them to receive alert to tell them potentially that they've come in close contact with somebody who's tested positive for COVID-19.
Fantastic. So I know this technology, originated, out of Singapore, right? That was where the ideas were starting to get rolling, and then it started to spread out globally. How did NearForm get involved? How did this project get started?
So we got a call from the HSE back in March, I think it was March the 22nd, to basically ask if we could help them build a contact tracing application. It was the same weekend that Singapore had launched their application, it had gone live. So we were happy to get the ask. We immediately put a team together, which included Kevin on the design front, Shaun on the development side, along with others. And within the first 24 hours, Kevin and Jeff, one of our other designers, had put together an initial design for what the app could look like and the experience the user would get through as they went through the app. And then that Monday, the Shaun and team kicked off. The initial ask was, could we have something by Friday that would run on a phone? And Shaun and team very bravely suggested they could have it done by Wednesday, and they did. So by Wednesday, we had a working app that you could deploy to Android and iOS.
So very, very, very quick. Just for everyone that's listening, HSE, that is the Health Services Executive. That's the government organization in Ireland responsible for national healthcare, right?
Yeah.
Fantastic. No, it's pretty amazing that it was able to go that fast.
But basically it was shipped in 3 days, right?
You had an initial prototype that was working in 3 days. It certainly wasn't ready for production launch within 3 days.
Ah, okay. Well, it took a little bit more time, so that was a lot of history. I think a lot of up and down happened between March and was launched like a few weeks ago, right?
Yeah, so it was launched on the 7th of July. So after that initial push to get an initial version of the app working. The key thing that wasn't working there initially was the contact tracing itself. So once we had all the kind of UI and UX flows in place, the actual detection using Bluetooth was not yet in place. And that's the bit that became the big stumbling block, primarily trying to get that working reliably on iOS devices due to limitations that Apple have in place.
Right. Yeah. A lot of that, if I'm recalling correctly, had to do with the fact that the Bluetooth, the actual mechanisms for the tracing wouldn't work if the application was not actively being used at that time or the phone was asleep. Correct.
Yeah. Essentially, once you locked your phone or the application went into the background, you lost the ability to detect certain events happening from a Bluetooth perspective.
Interesting. So yeah, so in response to that, but really, that's where Apple and Google came up with their they call the exposure notification service, correct?
Exactly. So we'd made various attempts to try and work around the restrictions, all of which were unsuccessful. You had a solution that worked in certain scenarios, but not all scenarios. So there was a reluctance to try and go out to the public with that, because obviously it was a far from effective solution for public consumption. And then in April, Google and Apple made the announcement that they're going to release the exposure notification service. That was finally released towards the end of May. And once, again, the Irish Health Authority made that decision to switch across to the Apple Google solution, then we had to go back to the drawing board in terms of sort of back-end architecture. There was a lot of change in the app itself, which impact, again, design. The design team had to take into account, because you were switching from a centralized solution to a decentralized model.
No, it's all fascinating. I mean, I could probably keep poking around for that for hours. But let's talk. Let's switch over and kind of talk about some of the technology that's used within the application itself. So less on what it does, and kind of what tools are being used under the covers to make it work.
Sure. So in the app itself, it's a React Native. It's being used to develop the app. We do have some native code in there, which is used to wrap the exposure notification service. So that's a combination of Swift and Kotlin. Then in the backend, we're using Node.js for the REST API. We're also using some Lambda functions, and we're deploying the solution into AWS.
Okay. Now, Matteo, I think you're happy about this. When you talk about Node on the back end, it's actually using Fastify back there. One of Matteo's favorite projects.
Yeah. Well, yeah, my baby, whatever. One of my little pet projects to some extent. So I'm pretty happy about it. I'm pretty happy that it was able to help, and it seems working very well. Hopefully,
it's working very well, Matteo. It's working very well.
Good. So he's not breaking it, so it's fine.
Yeah, as long as it's still up and running.
So this podcast is about all things JavaScript. React Native is developing multi-platform applications using JavaScript. Has been something that's been tried since Apple released the first iPhone, essentially. What were the up and down of using React Native?
Shaun, I think you'd be best placed to answer that one.
Yeah, sure, I can chime in. So I think the main benefit of using React Native is obviously we've got a lot of developers and experience that utilize React and just in the web browser, right? So migrating across to building for native platforms is a lot easier than going for other frameworks like Flutter or doing it natively in Swift or Kotlin. So I think we got a lot of benefit from leveraging our existing experience. But I guess in terms of the up and downs, the downs is that it's not the web browser, so it is native platforms themselves. So they have their own quirks with regards to how they navigate and transitions and how some of the APIs and storage mechanisms work. So I guess there was a lot of testing and debugging that went on, especially as we rolled in with the new exposure notification service, which was very fresh and documentation very light at the early stages. So I guess there was a lot of up and downs with that. But I guess as a team, we just try to, work really efficiently through the user journey to, deliver a good result at the end.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think the one question there is, starting from scratch, doing it all over again, would you still pick React Native, or would you go with another approach?
Yeah, I guess I've got some experience with other frameworks from back in the day, like PhoneGap and Cordova, and been through this loop numerous times with the promise of web technologies for native platforms. React Native definitely does deliver and ticks a lot of the boxes. Just some of the tool chain is a bit naive with regards to native modules and hooking that up. So it's a platform that's still growing and not very old. So there's lots of opportunities there. But I guess if we was to redo the project again, I'd definitely go with React Native just because of the speed of adoption and, the developers just being able to onboard in a matter of hours to get productive and actually start delivering code to contribute towards the project.
Yeah, I think the testimony there about having the initial proof of concept up in just 3 days, really says a lot for being able to get up and going quickly.
Yeah, and I guess with our experience leveraging React Native on our Polaris accelerator and stuff like that, it's given us a lot of background into how to effectively bootstrap one of these applications and get really running with it very quickly, which is what we did in those first 3 days. It was to develop out some user journeys that was coming from the design team that they put together in a snap over the weekend. So just iterating through those from a UI perspective was quite straightforward. And obviously with experience with developers who are very talented at NearForm, we could just blitz through it and really deliver.
Right on.
I've heard that the backend, all the code is open source, right? So people can actually take a look at how you use React Native, how you use Fastify, how you have set up your Lambda functions. Is where it is.
Yeah, so it was originally open sourced within the HSC's own GitHub account, but since then we've actually donated the code to the Linux Foundation, the Public Health Initiative. So there's a Covet Green project, which is all the code that was used to build the Irish app.
Yeah, and that's that project is really just getting going. Colm and I are working on that together to move that forward and get that project bootstrapped. The idea really there is for Covet Green to become the base of a broader set of tracking applications, that anyone can tap into. And it's not just the back end code; all the front end code, pretty much, end to end, the entire application is there, including all of the scripts for getting it up and running on AWS. So it's pretty extensive. Kevin, I wanted to kind of bring you into the conversation here in terms of the design challenge with this application. Obviously with something like a contact tracer, user trust is a significant element of that, right? What were some of the design challenges with building a contact tracer for Covet?
Yeah, so initially the challenge was speed. It was like Colm said, it was over a weekend, and myself and Jeff we had a chat with Colm on the Sunday afternoon, I think, and we just, every decision we made, we just had to go with it, so we just quickly decided, okay, this is a tool we use a tool called Miro, and Jeff worked on flows and wireframes, and I worked on the UI layer over that in Sketch. We used Abstract to kind of work together, so we were able to kind of, it's like a GitHub for design files. So we used that to kind of bring our designs together and with merges and branches. And yeah, like we didn't have much in terms of branding to go with. The yellow color is used for the Irish COVID effort from the HSE. So we kind of took some PDFs that they posted and had a look at the HSE website to get some color palette ideas. But yeah, a lot of just from previous projects I've worked on at scale, you're making judgment calls on color, accessibility, typography. You want to use a simple font that can be reused and translated, font sizes, and I guess with the app, the audience is everyone really. So you want it to be accessible and usable as possible. So the age range, I think the decision was made, it was 16 years and up. So anyone, from 16 to people in their, in their 90s or even beyond could be using this app. So you're not going for the most stylish design that is up to, not a design that needs to be flash or anything. It just needs to be usable and functional. And I think that was the goal from the designs that we did. So Yeah, we worked on that. It was we worked kind of late into the Sunday, and then I had worked with Shaun previously on a mobile project on the Polaris initiative, so I kind of had worked well with him in the past and the other development team. So we just did a quick demo on the Monday, got a good process in place, constantly kind of catching up with each other throughout the couple of days, and started feeding them designs and screens as they were ready, and got that kind of initial prototype ready for the Wednesday.
Nice. And what was the kind of the working the work model between the designers and the developers, kind of moving forward, ongoing up until the project was delivered?
Yeah, so we had I think Colm managed everything brilliantly. He kind of, it was a needs to know basis. He didn't need to have the Bluetooth team involved in the design calls, and he didn't need to have the designers involved in the back end calls. So we kind of had a kind of short and snappy stand up every morning. There might be a breakout with one of the front end developers, and we might spend an extra 20 minutes just trashing out what we were going to work on that day. But we just communicated well. We used a tool called Zeppelin. We used InVision for the prototype for the HSE members, and I think Trello as well for comments and bugs. And once we got to a point where we could get the application onto test flight, I was able to check builds against designs, and we just had a kind of a rolling kind of QA process with logging defects and bugs into Trello, and just hopping on a call if it was quicker, and going through screen by screen and giving feedback. The design, you're trying to satisfy both platforms, Android and iOS. So we kind of worked hard to make something that worked across both, common patterns, nothing too crazy. Just to try and keep it simple for both usability and for speed of development.
It really is an amazing process, in just thinking through, one, you mentioned quite a few tools there, and we'll make sure that links for all of those tools, and so listeners can follow up and go check those out themselves, end up in the show notes. But all, this entire effort, this work was, that was ongoing. It was all in the midst of, all this COVID crisis, everybody going remote, fully distributed teams and all this kind of stuff. And to be able to deliver an application, and what was it, like 1.3 million users within the first week, or 1.25, somewhere like that. It really speaks well for the team there, that, for all of you that put it together. It's absolutely fantastic work. But also for the process that you followed. It really is quite impressive. So, we talked about, process, we talked about, kind of the technologies. What were some of the challenges beyond time, right? And beyond some of, the things we've already discussed, like with iOS. What were some of the other challenges that that you really faced?
Well, I think from a project perspective, right, you have a lot of different groups that need to feed into this. This is a public health application. It's not just a technical solution that's needed. There's a lot of things that have to wrap around that as well. If you think about all the privacy concerns of an application like this, the process you have to go through in order to get the Data Protection Commissioner approval. So key to success really was very effective collaboration across all the different groups that were involved, which was NearForm, and then into the HSE and the wider groups in there. And that relationship and the strength of that relationship is really what was the key to successfully delivering this project.
So one of the main things that I've done working with the Italian government a long time ago was that it was really, really hard to work with them. Okay, really. And instead, it seems you have done a fantastic job in creating that type of environment where you could actually deliver things faster. So yeah, congratulations.
Yep. And a lot of credit for that. The people that were on the client side, on the HSC side, they were the right people. They made decisions. They put a lot of time and effort into this. They were very easy to work with. They were, everybody was heading towards the same goal: get a solution that will be effective.
Yeah, no, I'd echo that with Colm from I think I have worked on government projects in the past, and it can be kind of a slow process getting feedback, but we had a great relationship. We kind of had a joint Slack, email feedback. A lot of the decisions were around content in the app. and the onboarding flows and micro copy and that. So they were really, really helpful with that. And you know, as you can imagine, there were lots of inputs and changes, but you know, they reacted very quickly to our asks each day. So it was really great to work with them.
Yeah, that's excellent to hear. You know, that everyone's so vested in the project and moving it forward. So you did mention privacy, Colm. You know, some of the privacy concerns, and I know this has come up. You know, folks have raised some concerns about these types of applications and privacy. What are some of the ways that that those privacy concerns have been addressed, both in the app and just kind of in the process?
Yeah, I mean, the privacy concerns originally all oriented around the fact it was going to be a centralized model. There was a lot of, you know, attention picking up in the press around how data would be handled, how data would be stored, how secure would it be, etc. And then obviously the switch to the decentralized model was a big help in terms of that privacy conversation. In terms of kind of specific technical things we put in place, so we did take the view of we want to store as little amount of data as possible for a shortest time as possible, right? So if you think about, say, a typical app that you'd roll out, you'd want to put in lots of things like analytics and metrics to really understand how your users are interacting with your app, you know, where they're falling off, where they're having difficulties, which features they don't engage with. We didn't do any of that with the contact tracing app, specifically for the reason, again, because we don't want to track lots of data, regardless of how anonymized it is, etc. You were very conscious about when people, for example, are uploading their keys, that we don't store anything in the backend that would allow those keys to be linked back to any particular person or any piece of information that could help identify a person. So, for example, IP addresses are not stored or logged in the backend system. And again, security of the backend system was paramount. We did go through rounds of penetration testing and security testing. The source code was made available to certain groups before it was publicly launched, again, to look at it from a security perspective and give us feedback and things we could change. The app itself went through a round of penetration testing. So there was a lot of, effort put in to try and make sure that this was secure and was storing the right data in the right manner to help answer and alleviate any of those concerns in relation to privacy. And open sourcing the code base really helped that as well. And also the HSE open sourced a lot of the documentation they generated during the project. So I think that really helped from a sort of privacy management perspective.
Right. Now, you mentioned, going back to the point of the centralized model versus decentralized model. Can you go into that just a little bit more?
Sure. So centralized model, effectively what you're doing is when you do identify someone that has, say, tested positive for COVID-19, you will typically upload all the contacts that have been detected for that particular person, which means you have an index patient and then you know all the people that they've actually had contact with. So you have their interaction graph, for example, over the last 14 days. And that's why there's a lot of privacy concerns around the centralized model, because now you know exactly who has been in contact with who and when. With a decentralized model, all that information is actually held on the user's phone. So the central server does know the keys of the person, the identifiers of the person that has tested positive, but you never know from a central perspective all the contacts that person has had. So people will get notified on their phones. You will know, for example, that you've had a contact. You will never know who you had a contact with that had tested positive for COVID-19. So it's much better from a privacy perspective. There is challenges from an epidemiological perspective because you lose all that rich information in terms of who are your super spreaders, where particular locations you're having an increase in contacts, etc.
Right. But you're moving all the comparisons out to the individual devices rather than keeping it centrally located. So yeah. Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating. I could keep talking about that for for a while, but it is a JavaScript podcast, so we can bring it back to some of the technology and some of the challenges there. I know interoperability between these systems is going to be important. I know the Northern Ireland app just is launching this week, I believe. And there's a plan to ensure that the Northern Ireland and the Ireland app are interoperable. Can you talk a little bit about that, how that was achieved, and some of the challenges involved with that?
Sure. So the switch to the Apple Google solution makes that a lot more doable, because you now have standard identifiers being generated across apps that are using that one solution. The challenge we previously had when it was a centralized solution, a lot of the identifiers were unique to that particular system. So creating interoperability would have been a lot more challenging. So to enable interoperability, what we do is we actually exchange the keys that, for example, if somebody tests positive in the Republic of Ireland, they upload their keys to the backend server. Those keys are moved then to a federated server, and periodically Northern Ireland will go to that federated server and say, hey, give me all the keys that have been uploaded since the last time I checked by people in the Republic. And then it'll pull those down into the Northern Ireland backend and make them available to the Northern Ireland apps that are looking for keys of positive people. And that same flow happens in the reverse, so that people in the Republic of Ireland are seeing the keys from people that tested positive in the north.
So yeah, it's it's really impressive, because both governments, I mean, they have their own separate versions of the app, their own separate UI, user experience issue, details there. But on the back end, everything is still JavaScript, still Node servers, it's exchanging data back and forth. That's it's very impressive. What are some of the challenges there in terms of delivering the interoperability, or has it been relatively straightforward?
I think your main big challenge is just security.
Yeah.
What you need to ensure is that a bad actor cannot feed extra keys into your system and sort of pollute your pool of valid test keys valid keys of people that have tested positive for COVID-19. So the security aspect of those upload pieces is critical, because if that gets compromised, then effectively your whole system becomes ineffective. A lot of thought has to be given to that side of things. How do you make sure that's as secure as possible?
Now you're leveraging quite a bit of the AWS services right now in this whole thing. What are some of the key ones that you're relying on the most?
Yeah. So some of the key ones would be API Gateway. We're using Fargate. We're using Lambda functions that we've mentioned. We're using the typical service like CloudWatch, CloudTrail. We're using the Web Application Firewall, AWS Shield. We're using S3. We're using SQS and SNS. I'm sure there's a few others in there, or we are using RDS as well. Sorry, for the backend database. That'll be a key one as well.
It's pretty much all of the above.
Which database are you using?
It's a Postgres database, so Aurora Postgres.
So you didn't go for anything new, fancy, NoSQL or something like that?
Nope, went for the tried and tested.
Good choice. I love it.
Yeah, I would think with this entire, I've gone through the source code quite a bit, and pretty much the entire thing is tried, tested technologies, put together in a really, a really straightforward way, and I think it lends a lot to its success. That not doing anything fancy actually really helps. So, what's next with the Covet Tracker application? Ireland's been the Ireland solution's been out there for about a month. The North Ireland's going out. Where's it going next?
So we're in conversations with other government and states, where we have announced that we're going to be building the contact tracing app for Pennsylvania. And then we're engaged in additional discussions. We're obviously pushing to try and roll this out to as many places as we can, but we do feel it's an effective solution when it's augmented with manual contact tracing, that it really helps with the fight against COVID-19.
Now, in terms of the really helps, I mean, there actually have been some results for the application, right? There's something, I think, somewhere around about 90 or 100 cases that it was able to detect there in Ireland.
Yeah, that's correct. So we've had people uploading their keys that have tested positive, and then we have triggered close contact notifications to people that have come in contact with those people that have tested positive.
It's really fantastic.
So we've seen the full end-to-end flow that we want the application to achieve.
That's fantastic. I love it.
On the technical side, you mentioned that you're using both Fargate and Lambda. And which were and as well as the API gateway. So which one, like, why? What are you using each technology for? What purpose? Like, a lot of people, when trying to do, and I think a lot of our audience will actually be curious, because a lot of people think, oh, I'm actually using API gateways, so I'm only using Lambdas now. Or I am using containers and I am all in on containers and I'm not using any on the AWS service. In this specific instance, it seems you have gone with a mixed approach, which seems very pragmatic, that To be honest, I like quite a lot. But would you like to expand on that a little bit?
Sure. So API Gateway is sort of the public interface into the backend. It acts as a proxy layer effectively. So depending on the correct request, it's either routed to Fargate. So Fargate is a REST API that serves any of the requests that need actually database access. And then we also have data that we generate as static JSON files that sit on an S3 bucket. So they're generated via Lambda functions. And then for particular paths that are coming in, API Gateway actually routes those directly to S3 and just serves back the static file from S3. So things, for example, like the stats that we display in the app, they're pulled from that static file, and then we have a Lambda function that just updates that file periodically. So we're primarily using Lambda functions for more periodic back office activities that need to happen. So, for example, the periodic generation of the exposure export files, some of the integrations into the HSE back office systems, like, for example, pushing the check-in data back into the central statistics office once a day, or when a callback request is received, routing that number through into the CCT system.
Whoa, nice. Pretty interesting. How many, if I can ask, how many Fargate instance, how many containers are you spawning via Fargate for handling?
So we have, I believe it's 20.
Nice. Okay. Wow.
So we scaled up to a point where we were sure we were over capacity, but what we didn't want was to have any issues on day one. If traffic spiked, then we couldn't cater for it.
And, in terms of the traffic spike, I know, I think within the first 24 hours, there were like several 100,000 users. Was there any issue with onboarding any of those? Did the servers even hiccup?
No, everything ran very smoothly from a server perspective. We had no issues that we had to deal with. We had no fires we had to put out. So there had been a lot of testing done before the go live launch, including a lot of performance testing, and that paid off. Everything behaved as we expected.
That's excellent.
Whoa, I'm thrilled. When an application works perfectly, has nice performance at the beginning, it's just it's a good sign.
Yeah, we were happy with that.
Especially with something that's important, it's just it's really great to see. As I said a few times, it's absolutely excellent work. For the entire team there.
I have one more question though. So we have talked about things that are all JavaScript. So there is some React work, there is React Native, there is Node.js, there is Fastify, there is some Cloud bits. Yes. Did you have to write any part that was not JavaScript, like some Kotlin or some Swift for cater with iOS or Android?
We did. So we had to make the exposure notification service available to the React Native layer. So we had to create a React Native module with native code. So Swift on the iOS side and Kotlin on the Android side.
Are those open source as well, as separate modules?
That React Native module is open source as well. Yep.
Nice, cool. So if other people want, they can pick it up. Yay, great.
Yep.
Yeah, and that was part of the piece that was contributed to the Linux Foundation Covet Green project as well. So it's out there, for folks to use. So it's a really nice component, really well designed, and really provides a nice little abstraction layer for those APIs. So it's excellent. Worth taking a look at. Okay. Well, we don't want to keep you all, for too long. I know you all have, more projects and more work to do here. So, any closing thoughts on this, Matteo? Any closing questions or?
So, would you expect to, like, one of the biggest challenges that have been, we have briefly talked about this before, but I would hope that this code get adopted by more jurisdictions and more governments, mainly because we can get a little bit more interoperable with data. One of the key problems we can have right now in Europe is that those systems, we have the Schengen area, people can travel wherever they want, and unfortunately these systems do not talk to each other. So we would not know, and we could not really, we need to resort back to manual tracing if we find somebody. There were some cases recently in Italy of people traveling and they, got caught. They got Covet, and that all those systems would not have helped with that. So,
yeah, I think it's the key next piece is to really solve that interoperability piece across multiple jurisdictions.
Yep, that would be my closing thoughts. So I truly high hopes for these initiatives, and the fact that JavaScript and Node.js and React and React Native and so on are all contributing to helping the containment of the pandemic. So I'm pretty impressed, and I'm very proud for our technology to have played a part, and for the fantastic team. I was not involved, by the way, so neither myself nor James. So that was a quick disclaimer, or with tangential involved. So hey, that was fantastic. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you to the entire team putting this together. Kevin, Shaun, Colm, thank you for joining us here on OpenHive.JS. Just for the listeners, just as a reminder, you can catch us on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, or you can find us, if you go to anchor.fm, OpenHive.js, you can find other ways to listen to the podcast. We thank you all for joining us. We'll be back with another episode in a few weeks. Bye all. This has been another episode of OpenHive.JS, the podcast for all things JavaScript from NearForm. Join us next time for more insights into the open source and JavaScript communities. Until then, thank you for listening.